Start recording. There you go. Okay, right. Back after a couple of weeks and back into our lessons. So before we were away for a couple of weeks, we were looking at the parrots, weren't we? We were doing paintings of parrots, layering acrylic paint on the top with very small dashes to capture the feathers and so forth. We're gonna carry on working with birds, but we're going to look at a different artist today. And the reason we're looking at this artist is because someone said they were quite interested in composition. So this particular artist, Jakob Bogdani, he puts lots of different birds together, perhaps even birds from different parts of the world together in the same scenery or in the same picture. And he often has like little houses and things over in the background of the image. So he creates a whole scene with lots of birds all gathered together, it looks very unlikely that the birds would be like that. In fact, we were talking this morning and some of the pictures almost remind you of those specimen cases you used to get with all the taxidermy in them. And these photos or paintings are very dark as well because of the time that they were painted in. They were painted in the 1600s by Jakob Bogdani. And I came across them first when I went to Angelsey Abbey in Cambridgeshire last year, I think it was. And the owner of that place at the time, he collected quite a few of Jakob Bogdani's pictures. But the thing I really like about them, as well as the fact that all these birds have been arranged together, is the character of the birds as well. Some of the birds look like startled or like they're having a lot of fun. So if you look at a few of them, you'll see what I mean as well. And then the other idea behind this lesson will be to think about how we could perhaps put together birds in our own paintings and compositions later. All right, so we'll have a look at one or two examples, and I'll show you the drawing that I've done. And I'll show you the photograph that I've been working from as well. So we'll go over to the other screen. Okay, so here is a few photographs. Now, this particular one, I chose it because it had brighter colours. So I did, as I said in the email or on the website, I did collect quite a few other pictures that I found similar to Jakob Bogdani. So I'm not sure that this is actually a Jakob Bogdani, this one, but the colours are fantastic. And we've got some more parrots over here as well, and various types of birds. One of the things Jakob Bogdani often did is he used this is a Jakob Bogdani picture here. And he often used brightly coloured or red birds in his imagery to draw attention to certain areas of the image. So here you can see some quite exotic looking birds in the center there, and then up there I think that would be a jay, I think it is. And then over here a seagull, and we've got some other interesting types of birds as well. But you can see that he's used brightly coloured birds against the ones that aren't so brightly coloured to draw attention. So you've got that little duck, that duck's head at the bottom there, and then these exotic ones in the center. So you've got this scene, if you like, which looks very unlikely that you would see these birds in this situation, but at the same time we've got some really interesting images or characters in there as well. So you've got this bird sort of calling up to the larger one, and the jay at the top looking down at the seagull, who's absolutely massive compared to them. So I thought that this would be a really nice subject to look at. Now, a few people also mentioned, oh, these colours are really dark and dull and not as interesting. But most people, once they started to work on this, started to realise there was much more to these images than meets the eye. And they're really good fun to draw as well. So when I drew this picture, and well, not this picture, but a different one earlier today, or last night I started to draw it actually. Let me see if I can get it up on the screen. There it is. Just move, get that up there. So this is the one that I'm doing, and I'll show you the actual picture that I'm working from in a minute. So last night I spent an hour or so sketching this picture out, and I used a grid to help me do that as well. And you can see just quite close up on the image that I've drawn crosses over the rectangles. You can just about see what I'm talking about there. So when you've done your grid by folding your original photograph up, you can also divide the image into triangles by going from corner to corner. Some people today decided they were going to be brave and not use the grid, and it was working out absolutely fine. So if you're like prepared to sort of get stuck in and just draw the thing out, that's absolutely fine. I chose this composition because we've got these little houses in the background. We've got this excellent character of a bird in the foreground here, and then we've got we've got a kingfisher up just above his head, and another jay, and some other ducks and things down this side. So I'll show you the original photograph in a minute. Now, somebody mentioned they're very complicated, these pictures, and yes, they are very complicated. So a few people I suggested today that you could also just draw a section of one of these images as well. So if I just like move that over there, you might choose just to do a section like that bit of the picture, or you might choose to just do that section of the picture. But generally the idea is we're thinking about how things can be placed within a picture to create your own composition. So getting thinking about that, and then we're going to move on and start to use some other materials over the top of this drawing. And then later we'll create our own ideas and compositions using photographs and stuff as well. All right, so I'm going to hopefully, if I remember to put my camera on, we'll go over to my screen. That's gone off. So let me just see if I can get it on. There you go. There you go. Right. So, oh, it's frozen. It's frozen. There we go. Right. So as soon as you've finished drawing, so you saw my drawing just a few minutes ago, what I said on my message to you all is that we're going to combine this drawing or this piece of work with acrylics and oil pastels. So the main part of the acrylic background, this area, is a very thin wash of colour. So actually we've got two colours here. I used a blue up here, and then a yellow ochre down here. So this was primary blue mixed with ultramarine, and I kind of blended it towards the middle here, and this creates that kind of tonal background which then we can work over with oil pastels. All right, now if you haven't got oil pastels, then to be honest you may only get as far as doing the drawing and maybe adding some color on, which is what most people did today, and I expected that. But if you haven't got oil pastels and you want to have a go with these, then I recommend you invest, if you're going to do that, invest in some of these. These are quite nice ones to use. The other ones that are quite good are Galleria oil pastels. They're also very nice. And somebody had some Sea Bright ones as well. But if you buy the really cheap ones, oil pastels, you'll sometimes find that they come out all blobby and don't mix very well and things like that. And in fact, we did have one or two students today with some of these cheaper ones. They're the Langer Mark and Nickel, or I can't remember the name of it now. But so a reasonable priced set like this, I mean this is quite a big set, but you can get them half the size of that, and they're really nice to play around with and use for this. So when we get to this stage, you can see that I've already done a bit on this really cool duck, or whatever it is. I'm not sure if it's a duck or a goose, actually, to be honest with you. But here's the original photograph. And you can see how dark it is, but really this gives me an idea of contrast and shadows and things about where things are going to go. And you can see on here I've used almost quite different colors on here. So we've got these lovely greens behind his head, deep colors, but I've changed it and I'm trying to make a more contemporary version of this old picture by Jakob Bogdani just over here. But as I said, I really like the composition. I like how there's a kingfisher at the top, a house towards the background, and then the bird with his wings open in the foreground. We were saying that a lot of the birds that were used by this artist were from all over the place, but they were probably imported, whether they were imported live or as stuffed taxidermy animal creature birds. I don't know, but a certain amount of what happened with these images is obviously observation and imagination as well. This particular one over here, I think to me he looks like he's laying down on his, or he's been laid down on his back, and his wings have been arranged so that he can be drawn, because he doesn't quite look right, that one, to me. But anyway, it's a really nice subject matter to work from. There's lots of energy in these pictures as well. So when you're using your oil pastels, I'll do a little bit, perhaps where should I do a little bit? Do a bit more on this bird over here. So you can blend these colors really easily. And if you think about mark making that we've been learning during this course, which is lots of very small lines and dashes and things, you can do a very similar thing with oil pastels, and then get the colors to blend and mix together at the same time. So let me just see if I've got a couple of colors that I selected earlier. So here I've got a white, and to add a little bit of tone, I was going to use this yellow grey just here, and then for darker tone I've got this brown here. Can't see what the name is, it's too small, but it's a darker brown. Yeah, I can't quite see that, but anyway. So when you apply your white, you can just, let me get a bit closer for you. There we go. Oh, look at that, that's not bad. There we go, nice and in focus. So when you use the oil pastels, try to use, and you might need to peel it quite a lot, try to use the sharper edge of the oil pastel if you want smaller marks. So sometimes it's necessary just to break it or to chip a little bit off of there, and then you can very lightly, or you can press down quite hard actually if you want it to come out really clearly. Lots of little dashes like this, and then when you apply the next color over the top and around it, you can do similar things like little dashes and stuff, and you can get these colors to mix quite easily by layering the techniques on top of each other. So as we did with the parrot before, we were putting layers of color in black and white, weren't we, or kind of a black and white, and then after that we were layering other colors on top. So the same sort of principle applies really with this, in that you're layering lots of oil pastel on top of each other in order to get the tonal range that we're after, as well as the range of color into the picture too. And then eventually you'll be able to build up quite an interesting texture and almost like a painterly effect in your work as well, which is really nice to see. I often think as oil pastels as really like a stick of paint really. a nice oil pastel is well, these ones are quite hard, but they also come off on your finger when you kind of rub like this. So they've got a certain softness, a bit like a harder sort of paint. Some oil pastels, and I'll show you those a little bit later, Sennelier, they're really, really soft, and we've used those before when we've done other oil, when we did the landscape project. I think that was last summer actually. Was it last summer? I can't remember. But that's basically the idea. You keep layering the colours on top of each other using small marks, and I think you'll find it quite enjoyable because the colours are immediate and you get the effect of those colours instantly as you work over the top. So it's actually quite a lot of fun. All right, so hopefully you've all chosen a picture from the website that you would like to use, or from the drive, and we'll have a look at those together, and I'll give you any help I can with them. All right, so we're all speeded up again now, so we can see how the progress goes on this piece. So one of the things, as I said, I really love about this picture is the composition, but I love the character of the bird in the foreground, which was exactly where I started from in this piece. You'll see me adding details to a couple of the different birds in here. So we've got a jay at the top and a kingfisher just above the white bird in the foreground. Earlier on in the day, I worked on the bird, as you can see, and I started to put the background in. So one of the really nice things about working with oil pastels is it's so immediate. And once I'd got this acrylic wash applied in the background with those blues and yellow ochre and that little bit of green that appeared when I overlapped them, I was then able to apply either darker or lighter tones back over the top. So the white, even though the white doesn't come out really, really boldly white, what you can do is really push down with your oil pastel, and it will crumble a little bit with these Pentel ones, but you'll get a really bright white colour when you do that as well. So this is just me flicking back to the original drawing that I did. I was quite pleased with the original drawing. I like the quality of it and everything, and in some ways it was like, oh, I've got to paint over it, but well, you've got to do these things sometimes in order to make some progress and develop your work a little bit as well. So here's me working on this bird sitting on the branches over here with this kind or this scale of drawing or painting. It's important not to get too bogged down with the really minute details unless you decide to scratch back into the oil pastel to make finer sort of lines and things like that. So I was just really kind of dabbing away at the detailed areas with my oil pastel, making sure that perhaps I've got a broken edge on there as well, so that I could get into some of that detail. Now just here it may look like I'm using a black, but it's actually a dark green at this stage. I do occasionally wander into using a little bit of black, but I always try pretty much to use a light, some of the other colours to make a darker colour generally, or a darker tone within the image. So as you can see, as soon as you start adding in some background or the negative shapes around the bird, so I've gone darker as opposed to the bird itself, which is lighter, you start to see things really pop out of the picture, which is what has happened with the big white bird in the foreground. I think it's a duck or something like that. I'm not exactly sure, but I love the eyes on these birds particularly. So this was me just talking a little bit about ellipses for one of our evening students just there. And then I quite like the houses towards the background. So I start off looking at where the shadows and the tones are with those. And I've used a bit of yellow ochre and perhaps a little tiny stroke of another colour, and then in a little while I start to really mix those in together to create sort of a softer colour over the top. So even on these houses that you see me doing now, I'm putting in one colour, adding another one, bringing in another one, and as I do that, and because the oil pastel is soft and kind of blends in, when you start layering, you can really start to see the results quite quickly, and it's not a messy medium as paint can be. It's really nice because it's still a dry medium. In other words, there's no water involved, particularly with this, well, there isn't any. So there you can see a little bit of a highlight helps bring out the shadows on the house, and then I'm really taking my time with this. It's just really nice to enjoy all the textures. So if I was talking about things like leaves and things, you can see I haven't spent any time really sketching in individual leaves previously, and I'm leaving that all up to the oil pastel. So I'm using the oil pastel to create very small dashes and marks to imitate the texture of the leaves in the picture. You can see where I've been doing that. Now I've moved in a little bit closer, and you can see the houses, how I've mixed the colours up, and how it has this lovely painterly effect to it as well. And here I'm layering colours. If you put like a colour down on top of, say, a white, and then you want to you think, well, that colour was a bit strong, you can go back over with the white, and that'll help mix it and lighten it up a little bit as well. So just at this area there was some lighter leaves at the top there, and a few white highlights as well, which I've added in to the mix there. And then around that bird, which is a kingfisher, I believe, there was some grey and some white highlights to help the bird stand out, which is part of the design. So on this bird, somebody just asked me, where do you start? Do you start with the lights or the darks? Well, do you know what? I'm not worried too much about that. I'm working from a piece of artwork that I can see in front of me. So in a sense, I'm applying the colours that I can see in certain areas. So I could, on this kingfisher, for example, I've started with a nice deep dark blue, and I add some more colours onto that to darken different sides down. But you can see how many different colours you can apply to different parts of, say, this wing on this kingfisher just here. So I'm just dabbing in or stippling in or pushing in very small amounts of colours, and then those are kind of working together to create the effect of the kingfisher's feathers or plumage, or whatever you want to call it. So then again, as before, working around the outside of the bird, looking at where all the clouds are and starting to apply all of those. So at this point, I realized how much you can see the bird quite clearly even amongst all of this grey, because it's such a strong, bold orange and blue on there. So that has its own strength. And then that grey, even though it's tonally similar in some places, it all still pops out of the picture quite nicely, or out of the background quite nicely. So very enjoyable putting all those things together just there. And I really enjoyed as well putting on those highlights around the silver lining of the cloud, if you like. And over there, I noticed there were little smears of other colours in the clouds as well. Just below the J near my hand, you can see there was a little streak of pink in there, and I kind of picked up on that as I was working away as well. So lots of fun to be had with this. As I mentioned earlier, a few people said how dark and kind of dull these pictures were, but I also mentioned that once people had started working on them and maybe applying some of their own perspective on colour in there as well, still inspired by the main image from Bogdani, you start to get some really interesting and exciting and fun results from doing it. So here again we're adding plenty of tone around this bird, which, as you can see, helps him to pop out against those bushes in the background, because he's quite light and white. And then just down here you can see lots of dashes as I apply this kind of olivey green just down below the branch where the bird's sitting. So there are so many techniques you can do with oil pastels. And one of them, which you may want to try, is scratching oil pastel away from the surface to create lines. One thing I demonstrated to a particular student today was applying some candle wax on the surface of the paper, and then on top of that working with the oil pastel, which goes down quite nicely, and then once you go over the candle wax with the oil pastel, you can then you create this slippery surface underneath, and it means that you can use a sharp object to scratch through. I hope you've enjoyed today's lesson. I'll see you next time. Bye.